The humid air of the chapel clung to my skin like a shroud, thick with the cloying sweetness of too many white lilies. Their scent was a funeral scent, the same one that had filled my grandmother's house for a week after my grandfather passed, and it made my stomach clench. I sat in the third pew, the polished wood cool and unyielding beneath my damp palms. To my left, the entire, sprawling mass of my mother's family was a sea of somber black and muted whispers. I could feel the weight of their collective gaze, a few pitying, most disapproving, all of them a stark reminder that I was on the periphery now, an outsider in the one place that had always been my anchor. The lawyer, a Mr. Albright, cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the hushed space. He was a man carved from pale marble, his suit a sharp, funereal gray, his fingers, long and precise, resting on a simple mahogany box I knew well. It was Vauvois. The one that sat on her desk, filled with fountain pens, old postage stamps, and the faint, comforting smell of cedar and lemon polish. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. This was it. The reading of the will. The final, legal word from the woman who had been my sun, my moon, my entire constellation. I, Maria Elena Santos, Mr. Albright began, his voice a dry, monotonous drone, being of sound mind and body. I barely heard the preliminaries. My mind drifted back to Vauvois' kitchen, just 2 months ago. The air was warm, smelling of sautéing garlic and onions, the foundation of every good meal she ever made. She was at the stove, her back to me, her shoulders, once so straight and proud, now slightly stooped. I was sitting at the old oak table, its surface scarred by decades of family meals, tracing the grooves with my fingertip. "You have to understand, Minna Flor," she'd said, her voice soft but firm, her accent a gentle melody beneath the words. "Family is not just blood. It is a fortress. You build the walls together. You guard the gates together." "I know, Vovo," I'd murmured, my own troubles with my Aunt Katerina feeling childish and distant in the warmth of that room. "No, I don't think you do," she'd said, turning to face me. Her eyes, dark as rich coffee, held a profound sadness. "Sometimes, to protect the fortress, you must make difficult choices. Choices that will seem cruel to those who do not see the entire battlefield." She'd wiped her hands on her apron, leaving faint streaks of flour on the blue checkered fabric. "Promise me, Sophia. No matter what happens after I am gone, promise me you will remember the fortress. Remember who you are." I had promised, easily, foolishly, thinking she spoke in philosophical riddles as she sometimes did. Now, in the chill of the chapel, her words felt like a prophecy. Mr. Albright's voice cut through my memory. "To my beloved daughter, Katerina, I leave the house, its contents, and the entirety of my remaining financial assets held in my primary accounts at First National, to be hers, without restriction." A soft, satisfied sigh rippled through the pew where my aunt sat. I didn't need to look at her to know the expression on her face, the slight, smug tilt of her head, the barely there smile that never quite reached her eyes. I could smell her perfume from here, a sharp, expensive floral that fought with the lilies for dominance. Then, the lawyer's eyes, pale and unblinking, found mine. The air grew still. "To my granddaughter, Sophia," he said, and his tone did not change, but the words that followed felt like physical blows, each one landing deep in my gut. "I leave my personal collection of books. And my gold locket." Silence. A deafening, absolute silence broken only by the frantic thrumming of my own blood in my ears. Books. A locket. That was all. The rest of the will was a list of smaller, inconsequential bequests to distant cousins and family friends. I was disinherited. Cut out. Reduced to a footnote in my own grandmother's legacy. The heat of a dozen stares pressed against my skin. I felt my face flush, a burning wave of shame and disbelief. My hands trembled in my lap. I focused on a crack in the wooden floor in front of me, a dark, jagged line that seemed to split my world in two. The comforting weight of my mother's hand found my shoulder, her touch a small, desperate anchor, but I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at anyone. After the formalities concluded, the chapel erupted in a low hum of conversation. People began to move, their shoes making soft, shuffling sounds on the stone floor. I stood on legs that felt like water, my only thought to escape, to find a pocket of air that didn't smell like betrayal. I was almost to the heavy oak doors when a voice, sharp as broken glass, stopped me. "Sophia." I turned. Katerina stood there, her black dress impeccably tailored, her face a mask of carefully constructed sympathy. Behind her, my 2 cousins, Marco and Isabella, hovered like sleek, well-dressed shadows. "I know this must be difficult for you to understand," Katerina said, her voice dripping with a false, honeyed concern that made my teeth ache. But Mama was very clear in her final days. She was disappointed. "Your choices. That little art gallery of yours, constantly on the verge of collapse. The people you associate with. She felt you were squandering your potential. She wanted you to stand on your own 2 feet, without her help. Her words were lies. I knew they were lies. Vovo had been my biggest supporter, my first investor, my most ardent defender. She'd loved the gallery, had spent afternoons there, sipping tea and marveling at the local artist's work. To hear her faith twisted into this condemnation was a fresh, searing pain. She loved me, I whispered, my throat so tight the words were barely audible. Of course she did, Querida, Katerina said, reaching out to pat my arm. Her touch was cold, her fingers like talons. In her own way. But love doesn't mean enabling. She left you the books you always loved. And the locket. It's sentimental. I'm sure it means more than any amount of money. Isabella, who had never hidden her jealousy of my closeness with Vovo, gave a tiny, dismissive sniff. Marco just looked bored, already checking his phone, its bright screen a jarring, alien light in the dim chapel. I couldn't breathe. I pulled my arm away, muttering something about needing air, and fled, pushing through the heavy doors into the oppressive, muggy afternoon. The sun was a bleached white coin in a pale sky, and the world outside seemed too bright, too loud, too normal. Cars passed. A dog barked in the distance. Life went on, while mine had just been shattered. The weeks that followed were a gray, numb haze. My small apartment, once a cozy sanctuary, felt like a prison. The box of books from Vovo's house sat in a corner, a monument to my rejection. I couldn't bring myself to open it. The gallery, the verdant canvas, suffered. I had no heart for it. The vibrant colors of the paintings on the walls seemed to mock me, their joy a language I could no longer speak. I moved through my days mechanically, the sting of Katerina's words and the finality of that legal document a constant, aching echo in my mind. My mother tried to bridge the gap. She'd call, her voice soft with worry. Sophia, please, come to dinner. We can talk. But I couldn't. The few times I'd seen Katerina at family functions, her triumph was a palpable force in the room. She had redecorated Vovo's house, she'd told my mother loudly one Sunday, getting rid of all the old, dusty things. Each piece of news was another tiny cut. The fortress, it seemed, had new rulers, and I was no longer allowed inside the walls. It was on a rain-slicked Tuesday evening, over a month after the funeral, that I finally found the courage to open the box. The rain tapped a gentle, rhythmic pattern against my windowpane, and the room was lit by a single, warm lamp. The scent of cedar, faint but unmistakable, rose from the cardboard as I lifted the flaps. It was a smell that was pure Vovo, and for a moment, the grief was so sharp it was a physical pain in my chest. There they were. Her books. Not valuable first editions, but well-loved, well-read copies. Poetry by Pablo Neruda, sprawling Brazilian novels by Jorge Amado, her favorite books of gardening, their pages filled with her neat, looping handwriting in the margins. I ran my fingers over the spines, feeling the faint impressions of the titles, the slight roughness of the worn cloth. It was a collection of her mind, her soul. And it was mine. At the very bottom of the box, wrapped in a soft piece of faded blue velvet, was the locket. It was heavier than I remembered, a simple, oval piece of gold on a delicate chain. I clicked it open. Inside, on one side, was a tiny, faded photograph of my grandfather, young and smiling, his arm slung around a young, radiant Vovo. On the other side, was a tiny curl of my own baby hair, a pale blonde against the gold backing. Tears I had been holding back for weeks finally welled in my eyes, hot and insistent. This was it. My inheritance. A box of paper and a piece of jewelry. A wave of such profound loss and confusion washed over me that I felt dizzy. I clutched the locket in my palm, the metal growing warm from my skin. Why, Vovo? Why did you do this? The question was a silent scream in the quiet room. I must have fallen asleep on the couch, the locket still clenched in my hand, because the sound of my phone ringing jolted me awake. The digital clock on the cable box glowed with the time, 10:17. The rain had stopped, leaving a deep, wet silence outside. I fumbled for the phone, my heart giving an involuntary lurch. Who would be calling so late? The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and utterly unexpected. Is this Sophia Santos? Yes, I said, my voice rough with sleep and spent tears. My name is David Chen. I'm a senior vice president at Northeastern Trust and Wealth Management. I apologize for the late hour, but we've been trying to reach you for some time at the number we had on file from your grandmother, Maria Elena Santos. It appears to have been disconnected. I sat up slowly, the worn fabric of the couch scratching against my skin. Northeastern Trust? I'd never heard of it. Vovo had always banked at First National, the same as everyone else in the family. Disconnected? No, this is my current number. What is this about? There was a pause on the other end, the faint sound of papers rustling. Ms. Santos, according to our records and the terms of a private fiduciary agreement your grandmother established with us, You are the sole beneficiary of a numbered portfolio held at this institution. I blinked in the dim light, trying to make sense of the words. Sole beneficiary. A portfolio. I don't understand. My grandmother's will was already executed. Everything went to my aunt. This asset was never part of the probate process, Mr. Chen explained, his tone patient and precise. It was held in a private trust, completely separate from her primary estate. The triggering event for the transfer of assets was the confirmation of her passing. We've received the necessary documentation from the county clerk's office, and we are now prepared to administer the transfer. Would it be possible for you to come to our offices tomorrow? There is a significant amount of paperwork, and the nature of the assets is complex. Assets? The word felt foreign on my tongue. What kind of assets? Another pause, longer this time. I could hear the soft hum of a computer in the background. The portfolio is primarily composed of long-term equity investments, several private equity stakes, and a substantial position in fixed-income securities. The current valuation, as of yesterday's market close, is approximately $14,750,000. The world stopped. The air left my lungs in a soft whoosh. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. The number hung in the silence between us, a monstrous, impossible figure. Ms. Santos? Are you still there? 14 million, I repeated, the words a dry, brittle whisper. It wasn't a question. It was an attempt to make the concept real. Yes, that is correct. $14,750,000. He said it with the same calm cadence as if he were reading the time. Would 9 o'clock tomorrow morning be suitable? Our address is 1222 Constitution Avenue, 42nd floor. I managed to make a sound of agreement, my fingers numb as they ended the call. I sat in the profound silence of my apartment, the only sound the frantic, wild beating of my own heart. $14 million. The number echoed, growing larger and more surreal with each repetition. It was a fortune. A life-changing, dynasty-building amount of money. And Vovo had hidden it. She had created a secret, parallel inheritance, and she had left it all to me. The initial shock was a cold, spreading paralysis. Then, slowly, it was replaced by a hot, fierce surge of vindication. She had not disowned me. She had not been disappointed. This was the fortress. This was the difficult choice. She had known. She had known exactly what Katerina was, and she had protected the heart of her legacy from her. She had given Katerina the shell, the house, the public money, and she had given me the soul, the future. I looked down at the locket, still warm in my hand. It wasn't just a sentimental trinket. It was a key, a symbol. The final, secret message from my grandmother. A message that said, I trust you. I believe in you. The fortress is yours, I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window as the city lights glittered in the puddles below, watching the sky shift from black to deep indigo to a soft, pearly gray. The world looked different. The contours of my life had been redrawn in the space of a single phone call. The hurt and shame of the past weeks were still there, a raw, tender wound, but layered over them now was a profound, trembling awe, and a simmering, determined energy. The next morning, I dressed with a care I hadn't felt in months. I put on a simple, dark blue dress and fastened Vovo's locket around my neck. It felt different now. No longer a relic of loss, but a talisman of power. The offices of Northeastern Trust were in the city's financial district, a world of gleaming steel and reflective glass that felt a million miles from my dusty art gallery. The air inside was cool and smelled of lemon-scented polish and money. A silent elevator whisked me to the 42nd floor, where a receptionist with a perfectly calm smile led me to a conference room with a breathtaking view of the river. Mr. Chen was exactly as his voice had sounded, impeccably dressed, precise, and thorough. For over 2 hours, he laid out documents, explained the history of the portfolio. Vovo, it turned out, had been a brilliant, silent investor. She had used a small inheritance from her own father decades ago to buy stocks in companies she believed in, reinvesting the dividends, making shrewd, long-term plays. She had never touched the principal. She had never told a soul. Not my mother. Certainly not Katerina. She was a remarkable woman, Mr. Chen said, a note of genuine respect in his voice. She had a vision. She said this was not for a rainy day. It was for a sunrise. For building something that would last. I signed my name over and over, my hand steady despite the tremor I felt deep inside. The paperwork was a blur of legal jargon and staggering numbers, all written out in words. $14,750,000. When it was done, Mr. Chen handed me a simple, platinum-colored debit card linked to a new operating account he had established for me. For immediate liquidity, he explained. The first $100,000 is available to you now. The rest will be transferred into various accounts under your control within the next 5 to 7 business days. I held the cool, smooth piece of metal in my hand. $100,000. It was more money than I had ever possessed at one time. It was a down payment on a house. It was 2 years of operating expenses for the gallery. It was freedom. I walked out of that building into the bright morning sun, the city roaring around me, and I felt quiet. The anger at Katerina was still a hot coal in my chest, but it was now banked, controlled. This was not a lottery win. This was a weapon. This was a responsibility. Vovo had given me the means not just to save my gallery, but to build an empire of my own, a fortress of art and beauty that could withstand any storm. My first instinct was to call my mother. But I stopped myself. This was a secret. My secret. Our secret, mine and Vovo's. To reveal it now would be to unleash a hurricane of greed, resentment, and legal battles that would tear what was left of our family to shreds. Katerina would sue. She would claim undue influence, a lost codicil, something. She would fight with the tenacity of a cornered animal for a piece of this money. No. For now, silence was my armor. I went back to the gallery that afternoon. I looked at the scuffed wooden floors, the walls that needed a fresh coat of paint, the struggling local artists' work that I believed in with all my heart. For the first time, I didn't see a failing business. I saw a foundation. I unlocked the door, the familiar creak a welcome sound, and I breathed in the smell of turpentine, canvas, and dust. It was the smell of my dream. And now, thanks to Vovo, it was a dream I had the power to make real. I started small, cautiously. I paid off every outstanding debt the gallery had. I didn't move the money in large chunks. I set up a new business account at a different bank and made a series of smaller transfers for investor funding. I hired a part-time assistant, a bright, eager art student named Liam, to handle the day-to-day operations so I could focus on the future. I reached out to artists I'd previously only dreamed of representing, offering them stipends and guaranteed shows. The energy in the verdant canvas began to shift. The air of desperate struggle was replaced by one of vibrant, confident potential. The change did not go unnoticed. It was a Saturday afternoon, 3 weeks after my visit to Northeastern Trust. The gallery was bustling with people for the opening of a new exhibition by a brilliant, young sculptor from Chicago. The air was filled with the clinking of wine glasses, the low murmur of appreciative conversation, and the clean, metallic scent of the sculpted works. I was standing near the back, talking with the artist, when I felt a familiar, cold presence. I turned. Katerina stood just inside the doorway, Marco and Isabella flanking her. They were all dressed as if for a gala, utterly out of place in the casually creative crowd. Katerina's eyes swept the room, taking in the new lighting, the professional signage, the crowd, the hired server circulating with canapes. Her expression was a carefully neutral mask, but her eyes were sharp, calculating, missing nothing. She glided towards me, a tight smile on her lips. "Sophia. What a vibrant little gathering." "Aunt Katerina," I said, my voice calm, my hand instinctively going to the locket at my throat. It was my touchstone. "I'm surprised to see you here." "We were in the neighborhood," Isabella said, her tone dismissive as she glanced at a twisted metal sculpture. "Thought we'd see how your little hobby was faring." "It's faring quite well, thank you," I said, meeting her gaze evenly. Katerina's eyes were locked on me, probing, searching. "It certainly seems to be. New lights. A new show. You've been busy." She took a small step closer, and I could smell her cloying perfume again, a stark contrast to the clean scents of the gallery. "It's remarkable, really. Such a turnaround. Especially after everything. One might almost think you'd come into some money." The air between us crackled with unspoken accusation. She knew. She didn't know the details, but she sensed the change. Her predatory instincts were screaming that something was off. I held her gaze, allowing a small, serene smile to touch my lips. It was the smile that unnerved her the most. "I had a lucky break," I said, my tone light. "A silent investor who believes in my vision." Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "A silent investor," she repeated, the words flat. How convenient. For a long moment, we stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. The noise of the gallery seemed to fade away. I could feel the weight of the secret between us, a vast, invisible ocean of money and betrayal. She was trying to see through me, to find the crack in my armor. "Well," she said finally, the false smile returning, brittle at the edges. "Do give our best to your investor." She turned, a sharp, deliberate movement. "Come, children. The art here is a bit too modern for my taste." I watched them leave, the three of them forming a dark, disapproving island moving through the cheerful crowd. The door closed behind them with a soft, definitive click. The encounter was a warning shot. The battle for Vovo's fortress had just begun, and Katerina was now on the hunt. Continua a história. The victory of the gallery opening was sweet, but it was a sweetness laced with the bitter aftertaste of Katerina's suspicion. Her visit was a declaration of war, silent and undeclared, but war nonetheless. In the days that followed, I moved with a new, heightened sense of caution. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn Reed who specialized in trust and estate law. I provided her with all the documents from Northeastern Trust. Evelyn's office was a serene, book-lined space that smelled of old leather and brewed coffee. She read through everything, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, she took off her reading glasses and tapped them gently on the polished surface of her desk. "It's ironclad, Sophia," she said, her voice firm and reassuring. "Your grandmother was meticulous. The trust is a separate legal entity, fully funded and executed outside of her will. Katerina has no legal standing to challenge it. None. The only way she could even try would be to prove undue influence or lack of capacity, but the medical affidavits from your grandmother's physician attached to the trust documents would shred that argument in minutes." She was of impeccably sound mind. A knot of tension I hadn't even fully acknowledged began to loosen in my shoulders. "So, she can't touch it?" "Not a penny," Evelyn confirmed. "However," she added, a note of caution entering her voice, "that doesn't mean she won't try to make your life difficult in other ways. People like your aunt, when they feel cheated out of what they believe is rightfully theirs, they can become creative. Be careful. Watch your back. And for God's sake, don't give her any ammunition. No lavish, public spending sprees. Not yet." I heeded her advice. The money sat in its accounts, a sleeping giant. I used only what was necessary for the gallery and for a few, quiet upgrades to my own life. I moved out of my cramped apartment and into a beautiful, light-filled loft not far from the gallery. It was a significant step up, but I was careful to choose a place that could be explained by the gallery's newfound, modest success. I bought a reliable, pre-owned car. I lived well, but not ostentatiously. I was building a life, not a monument. The true monument was the gallery. With financial security, my vision expanded. I launched a grant program for emerging artists, naming it the Maria Elena Santos Foundation. The first time I saw the name on the official letterhead, I felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. This was what the money was for. This was the sunrise Vovo had spoken of. I began acquiring pieces, not just for resale, but to build a permanent collection. The verdant canvas became a destination. Art critics from major publications started to visit. The local struggle was becoming a national conversation. The smell of success was a heady mix of fresh paint, sawdust from new constructions, and the crisp pages of art catalogs. Meanwhile, the temperature within my family continued to drop. Family dinners became a frozen, polite pantomime. Katerina's barbs were more subtle now, layered with a false concern that was more poisonous than her open hostility. "The gallery is doing so well, Sophia," she said to me one evening at my mother's house, her voice syrupy sweet. The air was thick with the smell of my mother's roasted chicken and the underlying tension that was now a permanent guest. "It must be so stressful, all that expansion. I do hope this silent investor of yours is a patient man. The art world is so fickle. All that money, it could vanish in an instant." "It's a woman, actually," I said calmly, helping my mother carry plates to the table. "And she's very patient. She believes in long-term growth." Katerina's smile tightened. "A woman? How interesting. Someone from the city? Perhaps I know her." "She prefers her privacy," I said, meeting her gaze across the table. "I respect that." My mother, caught in the middle, fluttered nervously between us, her hands constantly wringing a dish towel. She knew something was happening, a seismic shift she couldn't see, and it terrified her. "I'm just glad the gallery is doing well, Sophia," she'd say, her voice pleading for normalcy. "Your grandmother would be so proud." "Yes," I'd say, my hand going to the locket. "I believe she would." The Cold War lasted for nearly 6 months. Then, the first shot was fired. It came in the form of a formal, legal-looking letter delivered by a process server to the gallery. Liam brought it to me, his young face pale with worry. "This looks serious, Sophia." My heart thudded against my ribs. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. It was not, as I had feared, a lawsuit over the trust. It was something else entirely. It was a notice of a challenge to Vovo's will. Katerina was claiming that the collection of books and the locket bequeathed to me were, in fact, family heirlooms of significant sentimental and monetary value, that were intended to be part of the estate's assets and should have been divided equally among the heirs. She was demanding their return for a formal appraisal and equitable distribution. I actually laughed, a short, sharp, incredulous sound that echoed in the quiet gallery. The books. The locket. It was so petty, so transparently vicious. She couldn't get the money, so she was going for the things that symbolized it. She was trying to take Vovo's final message away from me. I called Evelyn immediately. "It's a nuisance suit," she said after I read her the letter. "It hasn't got a leg to stand on. The will is explicit. But she's forcing you into a legal response. She's trying to drain your resources, to bully you, to wear you down. It's a classic tactic." "What do I do?" I asked, the initial laugh now replaced by a cold, hard nod of anger. "We fight it," Evelyn said, her voice grim. "We don't give an inch. If we capitulate on this, she'll see it as weakness and come for something else. We respond forcefully and make it clear that any further frivolous actions will result in us filing for sanctions against her and her lawyer." Preparing our response was a draining process. It required digging out the original will, getting affidavits from Mr. Albright about the specificity of the bequest, and having a certified appraiser evaluate the books and the locket. The appraiser, a kindly, older man with spectacles perched on the end of his nose, spent an afternoon in my loft with the collection. "The books have negligible monetary value," he said, making notes on his clipboard. "Sentimental, of course. But the market for well-read, annotated copies of these editions is limited." He then picked up the locket, turning it over in his hands, examining it with a loupe. He was silent for a long time. "This is interesting," he murmured. "What is?" I asked, a trickle of ice running down my spine. "The craftsmanship is exceptional. Mid-19th century, I'd wager. Portuguese, most likely." He clicked it open, looked at the photographs, then closed it again. He ran his thumb over the smooth back surface. "There's something, He took a delicate tool from his case and applied a tiny amount of pressure to the very edge of the locket's back. With a nearly silent, precise click, a hidden, hair-thin seam appeared, and a second, secret panel swung open. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. I had owned this locket for months, worn it almost every day, and I had never known. Inside the hidden compartment was not a photograph or a lock of hair. It was a tiny, tightly folded square of paper, yellowed with age. The appraiser, using a pair of tweezers, carefully extracted it and unfolded it on the table. The paper was covered in Vovo's familiar, looping script. It wasn't in English or Portuguese. It was in a code of her own devising, a mix of both languages and numbers that she and I had used when I was a child, writing silly secret messages to each other. My eyes scanned the message, my brain automatically translating the familiar patterns. It was a list. A list of numbers, dates, and a single, final sentence that made my knees go weak. "My dearest Sophia," the decoded sentence read. Asterisk, if you are reading this, you have found the heart of the fortress. The numbers are the access codes for the safety deposit box. The key is taped behind my old writing desk, in the house. What you find there is the final piece. Use it to build your sunrise. Com amor, sempre, vovó asterisco. The appraiser was looking at me, concerned. "Miss Santos? Are you all right? You've gone quite pale." I managed to nod, my mind reeling. The locket wasn't just a symbol. It was a map. And the final piece of the inheritance was still inside the house that now belonged to Katerina. The plan formed in my mind over the next 24 hours, a desperate, reckless scheme born of necessity. I couldn't ask Katerina for access. I couldn't tell my mother. I had to get into that house, and I had to do it without anyone knowing. The opportunity came the following week. My mother mentioned, offhandedly, that Katerina and the cousins were flying to New York for a long weekend to see a Broadway show and do some shopping. The house would be empty. The night they left, a storm rolled in. The sky was a bruised purple, and the wind howled, whipping rain against my windows in great, sweeping sheets. It was perfect. The noise and the weather would provide cover. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs as I pulled my car onto a dark, tree-lined street 2 blocks away from Vovo's old house, now Katerina's sterile showpiece. I sat there for a long time, the engine off, the wipers stilled, watching the house through the rain-streaked windshield. It was dark, a hulking silhouette against the stormy sky. A place that had once been filled with warmth and the smell of baking bread was now just a structure, a vault holding one last secret. I pulled the hood of my dark raincoat over my head and stepped out into the gale. The wind snatched at my coat, and the cold rain stung my face. I moved quickly, my sneakers making soft, squelching sounds on the sodden grass. I didn't go to the front door. I went around to the side, to the door that led into the garage. Years ago, when I was in high school, I had accidentally locked myself out, and Vovo had shown me where she kept a spare key hidden in a fake rock in the flower bed. I prayed with every fiber of my being that Katerina, in her zeal to erase all traces of the past, had not found it. My fingers, numb with cold and fear, scrabbled through the wet mulch and dripping hosta leaves. I found the fake rock, its texture unnaturally smooth. I lifted it. And there, nestled in the damp earth, was a small, rusting metal box. Inside was the key. The lock turned with a gritty, protesting sound. I slipped inside, closing the door softly behind me. The garage was cavernous and smelled of concrete, gasoline, and the faint, lemony scent of Katerina's luxury car. The door into the house was unlocked. I stepped into the mudroom, my senses on high alert. The house was silent, but it was a heavy, watchful silence. The air was cold, the heat turned down for the weekend, and it carried the alien smells of Katerina's expensive, impersonal decor, a hint of potpourri and furniture polish. I didn't dare turn on a light. I used the small flashlight on my phone, its beam cutting a narrow path through the oppressive darkness. I moved through the familiar rooms, but they were wrong. The furniture was different, sharp-edged and modern. The walls, once a warm yellow, were now a stark white. The lingering ghost of Vauvois cedar and lemon was completely buried under Katerina's oppressive floral perfume. It felt like a violation. I made my way to the study. This was the room Katerina had changed the most. Vauvois' old, massive writing desk was gone, replaced by a sleek, glass-topped table. My heart sank. If the key was taped behind the old desk, it was long gone, tossed in a dumpster along with the rest of my grandmother's history. I stood in the center of the room, despair beginning to curdle in my stomach. The beam of my flashlight danced over the empty walls, the barren shelves. I had come so far, risked so much. It couldn't end here. Think, Sophia, think. Where would Vauvois have hidden it if not on the desk itself? She knew Katerina. She knew her daughter's disdain for the old things. She would have chosen a place that was permanent, a part of the house itself. And then I remembered. The writing desk had sat in front of the room's largest window, its back to the wall. Behind it, just above the baseboard, there had been a loose floorboard. I discovered it as a child, hiding there during a game of hide-and-seek. Vauvois had sworn me to secrecy, calling it our spy hatch. I dropped to my knees, my heart hammering anew. I crawled to the spot where the desk would have been, running my fingers along the edge of the baseboard. The new owners had redone the floors, sanding and refinishing them. Had they covered it? My fingers brushed against a slight, almost imperceptible seam. I pressed. There was a faint give. Using my car key, I carefully pried at the edge. With a soft, scraping sigh, a small, rectangular section of the floorboard lifted away. I shone my light into the dark, dusty space. And there it was. A single, old-fashioned, brass safety deposit box key, tied with a faded piece of red string. Next to it was a small, sealed envelope with my name written on it in Vauvois' hand. I grabbed them both, my hands trembling violently. I stuffed the key into my pocket and, without thinking, tore the envelope open. Inside was another note, shorter than the first. Minha Flor, it began. Asterisk, by now you know about the money. It is yours to build with. But this key, this is for you to know who you are. Our family story is not what you have been told. The truth is in the box. It is a heavy truth, my darling. Be brave. Whatever you find, remember you are my sunrise. Always, asterisk. A heavy truth. The word sent a fresh chill through me, deeper than the cold of the house. I replaced the floorboard, stood up, and fled. I moved back through the dark, silent rooms, out the garage door, into the cleansing fury of the storm. The wind and rain felt like a baptism, washing the scent of that house off me. I ran back to my car, my clothes soaked through, my body shaking with cold and adrenaline, the key clutched in my hand like a shard of lightning. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving a world washed clean and sparkling under a bright, hard sun. I drove directly to the main branch of First National Bank, the key and the note with the access codes burning a hole in my purse. The safety deposit box vault was in the basement, a silent, climate-controlled room that smelled of cold metal and old paper. The attendant, an elderly man with a kind face, led me to a small, private viewing room. I inserted the key, my hand steady now. The box slid out with a smooth, heavy sound. I carried it to the table and lifted the lid. There were no stacks of cash, no gold bars. The contents were a collection of memories and secrets. On top lay a large, leather-bound journal. Beneath it were bundles of old letters, tied with ribbon, and a few official-looking documents. And nestled to one side, in a small velvet box, was a stunning, antique diamond and emerald ring I had never seen before. I ignored the ring and picked up the journal. I opened it. The first page was a birth certificate. Not Vauvois. It was for a baby girl named Elena, born to Maria Elena Santos. But the date was wrong. It was from a year before my mother was born. A sister. An aunt I never knew existed. With a growing, sickening dread, I began to read the journal. It was Vauvois' story, written in her own hand, a story she had kept locked away for over 50 years. It told of a young, passionate love with a man who was not my grandfather. A man her wealthy, traditional family had forbidden her to marry. She had gotten pregnant. They had planned to run away together. But the night they were to leave, he had disappeared. Vanished. Her family had shipped her away to a distant relative in the countryside. They had taken the baby, the little girl named Elena, and given her up for adoption, telling Maria the child had died. She had returned home, heartbroken and hollow. A year later, she had married my grandfather, a good, kind man chosen by her family. She had loved him, in time, but the loss of her first love and her first child was a wound that never fully healed. She had never told him. She had never told my mother. The secret had been hers alone to bear. The letters were from the lost love, a man named Antonio. They were filled with plans, with dreams, with a desperate, youthful passion. The final letter was dated the day they were to run away. Asterisk, I will be there, my love. Wait for me, asterisk, he had never come. The official documents were the last, crushing piece. They were from a private investigator, hired by Vovo in her later years. He had found Antonio. He had died in a car accident on his way to meet her that night. A tragic, meaningless accident that had stolen 2 lives before they could even truly begin. The investigator had also found Elena. She had been adopted by a family in a neighboring state. She had lived a full life. She had passed away 5 years ago from cancer. She had never known her birth mother. I sat in that sterile, silent room, the journal open in my lap, tears streaming down my face. This was the heavy truth. This was the pain my vibrant, strong grandmother had carried inside her every single day. The fortune she had built wasn't just from shrewd investing. It was from a lifetime of quiet, desperate saving, a monument to a lost love and a lost daughter, a penance and a promise. She had given it to me not just because she believed in me, but because I was the dreamer, the one who took risks, the one who reminded her of the girl she had been before life had broken her heart. The diamond and emerald ring had been Antonio's engagement present to her. She had never been able to wear it. I left the bank an hour later, the journal and the ring in my bag, my soul feeling 1,000 years old. The money no longer felt like just a gift. It felt like a legacy of love and loss, a sacred trust. I understood now why she had hidden it from Katerina. Katerina was pragmatic, hard, unyielding. She would have seen the story as a messy, emotional scandal. She would have dismissed it, maybe even been ashamed of it. She would never have understood the profound, heartbreaking weight of it. I drove to the cemetery. I stood before Vovo's grave, the fresh, green grass smelling of damp earth and recent rain. I placed a single white lily on the headstone and let my fingers trace the letters of her name. I understand, Vovo, I whispered into the quiet air. I know about Elena. I know about Antonio. I'm so sorry. The wind rustled the leaves of a nearby oak tree, a soft, sighing sound. I'll carry it for you. I'll make your sunrise as beautiful as you dreamed it would be. I knew then what I had to do. The war with Katerina was a pointless, draining skirmish in the face of this vast, human truth. I couldn't live with the secrecy and the lies anymore. It was poisoning me, poisoning my relationship with my mother, poisoning the memory of my grandmother. I had to end it. But I would end it on my terms. I called Evelyn. Draw up the paperwork to settle Katerina's nuisance suit, I told her. I'm going to give her what she wants. Sophia, are you sure? Evelyn asked, her voice filled with surprise. After everything? I'm sure, I said, my voice calm, resolute. But I have one condition. We all meet. Me, Katerina, my mother. In Vovo's house. We settle this face to face. The meeting was set for the following Sunday afternoon. I arrived at the house with Evelyn by my side. Katerina had already arrived, her lawyer, a slick, smarmy man named Mr. Dryden, standing beside her. My mother was there too, her face a mask of anxiety and confusion. The air in the living room was thick and still, the expensive furniture feeling more like a stage set than a home. Well, Katerina began, her voice crisp with triumph. I'm glad you've come to your senses, Sophia. This foolishness has gone on long enough. I didn't sit down. I stood in the center of the room, facing them. I took a deep breath, the scent of Katerina's perfume making me nauseous. I'm not here to fight you, Katerina, I said, my voice clear and steady. I'm here to give you what you asked for. The books. The locket. You can have them appraised. You can sell them. I don't care. Katerina's eyebrows shot up in surprise, then settled into a look of smug victory. Well, it's about time. But first, I said, reaching into my bag. There's something you need to hear. Both of you. I looked at my mother, her eyes wide and fearful. You deserve to know who your mother really was. I pulled out Vovo's journal. I didn't read all of it. I told them the story. I told them about Antonio, about the passionate, forbidden love. I told them about the pregnancy, about the baby girl, Elena, who was taken away. I told them about the car accident, the lifetime of silent grief, the private investigator, the ring. I held it up, the emerald catching the light, a glittering, painful testament to a life not lived. As I spoke, the room changed. The smugness drained from Katerina's face, replaced first by disbelief, then by a dawning, horrified understanding. My mother began to cry, soft, helpless sobs, her hands covering her mouth. She never told me, my mother whispered, her voice broken. She never said a word. She carried it all alone, I said, my own eyes stinging. The money, Katerina, the money you're so obsessed with, it wasn't just money. It was her grief. It was her penance. It was a monument to the daughter she lost and the man she loved. She left it to me because she knew I would understand the story. She knew I would honor it. I turned to Katerina. Her face was pale, her carefully constructed composure shattered. She looked small. She didn't cut me out because she didn't love me, I said softly. She gave me the heavier burden. She gave me the truth. She gave you the house, the normal life, the freedom from this pain. She protected you from it. And you've done nothing but spit on her memory. I placed the journal on the glass coffee table. Then I took the locket from around my neck and laid it gently beside the journal. It's yours, I said to Katerina. The books are in a box in my car. I'll have them brought in. But know this. This is the last thing you will ever get from me. The legal fight is over. But so is our family. The fortress is mine now. And you are no longer welcome inside the walls. I turned and walked out of the room, Evelyn following silently behind me. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door, into the warm, afternoon sun, and I breathed in the free, untainted air. I could hear my mother's sobs and Katerina's stunned silence fading behind me. I had lost the family I thought I had. But I had found my grandmother, truly and completely, for the first time. And in finding her, I had found myself.